Welcome back to another SuperCoach video with me, JD. You are joining me for the round 17 review. And I've made it to this point in the year before I made the same mistake I always make every year, which is I hit record, I do like a 20-30 minute video, and because I didn't check the audio at the start, I only find out once I finish recording and go to edit that something had stuffed up. Oh, no one to blame but myself. It is so frustrating, and to be honest, I was a pretty good cut. I really liked what I was talking about. I mean, this is always just one edit for me. Start to finish, that's it. Nothing in the middle. No chops, no edits, none of that little fancy stuff. It's just straight off the top, and whatever I say. And the problem is, doing it a second time just never feels as right. I'm sure anyone that's done the same type of recording stuff, like, sometimes the first take's just it, and everything after that feels inadequate. But hopefully this won't be. Hopefully this will be really good, but I promise you my other stuff even better. So we're going to cover a little bit today. We had new DPPs drop, which we'll talk about quickly. We'll talk about some of the underperformers and, of course, my team as well. But before I jump into any of that, I'll just do a quick shout out to the FantasyTakeTV team. Absolutely flying. I think we've got 3 of the top 6 overall at the moment. We're still leading the leagues for like 6, 8, 10, 12, 18, 20 man. So all the ones that we actually put in leagues for, including, I think, the top 10 or 11, 20 man side. So the Discord and the wider crew are killing it, and those that have, jumped on the preseason package, for example, hopefully reaping the rewards, or at least those that have been part of the community for the year have been enjoying their SuperCoach experience that little bit more. Me, myself, I dropped a 26-1-5 this week, which moved me up another 45 ranks into 157 overall. So on the charge for top 100, and now that I've dropped those Clayton Oliver shackles, hopefully we can continue to move up. My one trade for the week was Oliver to Butters. And the reason why I picked Butters over a midfielder like a Sarong or a Parrish or someone like that is so I could open up the bench options I had to cover Dunkley, which you can see I did this week. So I saw what Melican and Fletcher scored, and then put the loophole, which was like Gilby there. So I got Melican's score this week. So the 69, which was okay. It's not a great score, but given that a lot of people's 23rd were players like Sheasel, who scored a 65, or a Keys, who was in the low 80s, or Himmelberg, who I think was about 90, really didn't lose that too many points that this week on that, which was pretty good. And yeah, decided to hold Dunkley because even though I think he probably misses a second week this week, it's probably only 2, maybe 3 weeks tops. Although I feel like I've said this before, very Groundhog Day, where it sounds like Oliver's gone for another month. So holding Dunkley, getting rid of Oliver, finally, what's happened. So let's talk through my team quickly. Defense itself held up really well. The 6 on field, they're all basically tonned with the exception of Sinclair. Dacos goes from strength to strength. Looks like it's going to be his year for the Brownlow. Looks like he's going to be the best player in the league. Just killing it, absolutely crushing it. Stewart was good, but I felt like a lot of this was junk time. Probably helped that Duncan had moved a little bit forward as well. Dawson, this was pretty junk time-esque as well. Interesting game, and go the Dons. Eat it, Jords. But for the first half, I thought like the Adelaide midfield got beat pretty handily, and so they're running Dawson and Laird, and then using like one of Pedler or Rochelle as the third rotation, with Key starting forward, who only had, I think, 2 CBAs attended for the entire game. And both Dawson and Laird were like sub 50 SuperCoach, I want to say, at halftime. Like, they weren't particularly going well. And then in the third quarter, Dawson was still starting at CBAs, but then running up behind the ball. Keys was moving from that forward position and then actually coming up to the midfield at stoppages. So even though Keys' stats don't reflect it from a CBA perspective, he was basically full forward in that, not full forward, he was forward full time in that first half. And then in the second half, he was actually playing up as a midfielder, just not at the CBAs. And so he was able to kind of salvage a score from that get to 80, but obviously a concern going forward. And then Dawson was able to really cook in that third quarter when Crows actually had the better of the gameplay. And even into the fourth, where he was taking intercept marks, getting involved in some of the switch kicking, that type of stuff. So, I mean, yeah, he's just going from strength to strength when it comes to scoring. But, yeah, like, not a great game. And same with Laird. Like, I don't think he was particularly good, but junked a fair bit late. And then Sinclair, I actually thought this is one, like, him and Cogs were probably the two that'll look at their scores and go, like, I thought they were much better than what they actually ended up on SuperCoach. And Doherty's been good. He's been good ever since being traded in. And then Day had another respectable score, which is all you can really hope for when others, have some of those other players underperforming. Talking about in that spot, this is great. Now, if I had the spare trades, love to turn him into a Sicily this week, but that's not going to be possible. And then the one that killed this week, who I've been anti all week, was Luke Ryan. Geez, like just absolutely insane. I thought during this patch here, what is it? This like round 9 to about like 16 with this Dons game as an outlier. They had learned that what they were doing with Luke Ryan was no bueno. That this first 8 weeks of the year, like when they were losing all the time, just putting it through Luke Ryan, just not working. And for whatever reason, they've gone back to it, and it's just so disgusting to watch. In terms of like intercept defense, he actually was pretty good, but just the ball movement is so bad out of the back line. I can't believe they've continued to do this. It's nutso to me. And I still won't recommend him. I wouldn't recommend, like, I was very anti-Lloyd, very anti-Ryan. At least one of those two have worked out, I guess. But yeah, that's the one that's killing me. I'd still rather have, I think, Sicily at this spot if I could, and then just back in these other 5 to beat out Ryan from here. But if you're looking for defender upgrades, I think that's where you go if you've got the trades to do it. In the midfield, overall, really happy with them. Like Bont, Merritt, Neal, Petrarca, all had claims, I think, to be best on ground in their respective games. Well, I think Bont probably might be a little bit hard with Dacos on the other side. But yeah, all very good. I think Neal was a little bit of junk in this one. Merritt, I thought, this could have been a higher score, but whatever. And then Brayshaw was like, it's one of those weird games where he accumulated and had decent disposal efficiency for him and had high contested possessions, and it didn't translate to a good score. And it's partly because they got blown off the park, and partly because he was like handballing a lot. But yeah, we'll take it. You know, it's better than like Sarong, who some other people have instead of him, or whatever it may be. So he was just the 90 this week, which is good as a non-owner. And then Green's the one I'm a little bit worried about. Does he actually run out the year? We saw him drop off pretty heavily last year, and there was stuff going around with him moving his role and all this type of thing, but somewhat of a concern of what happens from here on out. Rucks were good. Don't have Briggs, so anytime English puts up points on Briggs, I'm pretty happy with that. Those that do have Briggs, you've just got to hope that the cash you made from getting rid of English is then, being translated into points on field somewhere else, and you're actually making that up elsewhere. But yeah, I'm never going to complain with English outscoring Briggs. Yep. And then forward line was pretty much pretty poor outside of Goulden and Cogs. Cogs, yeah, as I said, I thought he was underscored. He was best on ground for them, and Goulden was very good. Taranto, 2 games back to back, which is poor. Butters, this is very disappointing on debut. I think this is his worst score since he's become a full-time mid that I managed to cop this week. Yep, it is. Worst score since round 3, so is what it is. I'm sure he'll bounce back. It'll be fine, although Carlton, harder matchup for mid, so we'll see. And then DC, this has been a little bit problematic these last couple of weeks, and continue to be worried given that he's up against old Shrek this week in Jackson for the 1-2. So, we've touched on a few of the problematic players I want to talk about, but we'll go through a couple of them. So, Sheasel, yeah, this is, I think, really unfortunate for owners. It looked like he was due for a big week because you had Jay-Z out of the side going to sub. So, should have, no Hall on the side, should have really been able to put together a big score in a game that they lost pretty badly as well. But Griffin Lloyd got injured early. Zeeble came on. You would think that defender for defender, this would be fine. They kind of just shuffle stuff around a bit, but Sheasel continues to hold that role. But no, in the second half, they moved him forward of the ball, which compounded issues. Now, the thing about Sheasel is his run that's coming up is really nice for defenders. There's lots of really favourable matchups in here. Hawks, Saints, West Coast, Melbourne, Essendon, Richmond. These are all nice matchups that you could see some really good scores from him out of if he's playing defence. I listened to the post-game presser and I could not decipher from that whether he'll be playing defence or not. They didn't really talk about it too much. So this is a big watch because if he is going to play defence, I think he's a perfect hold, especially if he's your 23rd. But if, yeah, but who knows? Who knows where they're going to play him? If they're going to play him forward, then this is a big concern and someone that can go. The other defenders that people will be worrying or sweating on this week is Ridley and Lloyd. We'll start with Lloyd. So concussed, I don't think it was anything worse than that. So we'll miss at least 1 week. And look, honestly, really disappointing for owners because he had a good first quarter. It looked like he was on for his best game in about a month. If he could kick on, which, he's had one good week. A lot of these weeks are not finished with a good score, but it was obviously a really promising start, and Richmond are a nice matchup for defenders. He went 119 on them earlier in the year, so you'd imagine that it was good scores going to come out of this, and to be concussed is obviously very disappointing. So if you can get him to someone like Sicily in one trade, maybe even a Doherty in one trade, and you've got 3+ trades, then I think you would do that rather than holding him. And Ridley, this one's a little bit trickier. So he hyperextended his knee in the game in a marking contest, was on like a really good score. He still finished on like 80, even though he only played about half the game. Went off, had it strapped, came back on, played about 4 or 5 more minutes, wasn't able to work through it, pulled himself off and asked to be subbed basically, or just said no good, and they subbed him off. I think he probably only misses a week if he misses this week. It's probably unlikely that they would have sent him back out if they thought there was a chance there was some type of structural damage or anything like that. So we'll see how he goes this week, how he pulls up all that stuff. If he sounds like he's just going to miss the week, I think he's been scoring well enough that you can probably hold. Otherwise, it's a little bit like the Lloyd situation where if you could get him to someone like a Sicily in one trade and you still have like 2 trades left or whatever it is at the end of that, then I think you'd do it. If you used 2 trades and you still had 2 left afterwards, then I think moving him on to someone like Sicily would be okay as well. If you can't tell, I really like Sicily as an option this week. His run home is really nice for defenders too. So if I was in a position to be getting Sicily, or if I had a forced trade this week, I'd be trying to get Sicily, even if it was like a forced trade in my midfield, if I'm being honest. So, yeah, I think it's a good option. Keys I talked about as well. So, yeah, like it just depends on role. If he's playing that half-forward role where he gets to move up onto the ball, I think he's a fine keep. If he's just going to be playing more half-forward, full stop, then he's someone that you can't reliably trust to beat out rookie scores. Petrarca, I'm pretty worried about. Listening to the post-game presser from Goodwin, it sounds like they're going to continue to use him more of the ball, use him forward of the ball more often going forward. As I said, we don't edit these things; we just do one take. So they'll use him forward of the ball more going as the year progresses, and yeah, it's problematic, especially in tougher matchups against the Lions this week. I wouldn't be as worried if they're playing softer matchups because I think he can continue to kick goals. I think the good thing is, though, even though he played like maybe 75% forward, he still had 50% CBA. So they were doing stuff like starting him at the CBAs and then moving him forward. So hopefully they don't move him too forward too much throughout the year. And like I just think that their midfield really struggles without Oliver and Petrarca. They still got probably a few more weeks of that. So we'll see what happens. But I'm much more worried about Petrarca. And look, 1 week can be a long time in football because I'm looking at someone like Steele that had no strapping. He fixed his iron deficiency and came back at full strength, and he looked like the player that we saw a couple of years ago that was a top 8 and someone that you would really want to start and have a lot of trust in. He just looked like he was back. Now, some things went in his favor from a SuperCoach scoring perspective. Saints were down to 2 bench rotations from the end of the first quarter, which meant that he had much higher time on ground, like 10 to 15% more than what he'd had in previous weeks, which is going to give you a boost in scoring. But on top of that, he just looked like the Steele of old. So for those that have kept, got rewarded. And the reason why I say a week can be a long time, because honestly, from this point forward, this is probably a hot take, but like having Steele over Petrarca kind of feels like where I'd want to be. If I could just magically swap them without losing a trade. Steele's scoring potential has never been doubted. It's just been about the role. Sorry, not been about the role. It's been about his body and whether or not he's physically fit, and it looked like it this week. Now, I'm always cautious to go early on stuff like that because we've seen one good game from him and then reverting, but like really promising signs. And then someone like Petrarca, yes, he's still good forward with the ball, and he absolutely is an amazing player doing that. But it does matter for SuperCoach. You get more points more often scoring in the midfield. It's more reliable. So I'm pretty worried. And while he was, a dead-eye dick this game, kicking the 4 goals straight, that hasn't been him this year. He was kicking at like 25% before that. I think it was something like 12 goals from 46 attempts in the weeks leading up to this for Petrarca. So, yeah, wow, it's crazy how things can shift pretty quickly. Who else worth talking about? Oh, Josh Kelly, I'll touch on quickly. So for anyone that jumped on him as a pod, which probably isn't that many people, but I feel like I should talk about him anyway just because he's my boy. Probably the first true, proper, hard tag we saw this year. When I say hard, I mean he was less than half a centimetre away from him everywhere on the ground. It wasn't like he was kind of checking him at stoppages and then giving him a bit of room and trying to win his own ball the other way. No, he came there with one role, which was to not let Josh Kelly touch the ball under any circumstances, which was crazy. And like they didn't get the win, but it was effective in terms of stopping Kelly. So worst game of the year, I think he was in the 20s, lost a bunch of money. If you've got him, you're obviously concerned that this sets him up to be a target for future weeks, but I would just hold from here on out. And also, I guess if you're a if you're a Sheasel owner, that's a little bit concerning because Finn McGuinness could be coming his way this week. Oh, that would be scary stuff. And then, is there anyone else we're talking about? Oh, maybe Himmelberg. So look, he did lose a little bit of his kick-ins with Whitfield back. I thought might take some, but honestly, he had enough opportunity. He just butchered it. I think you're going to get mid 80s to maybe like 90s, like low 90s for Himmelberg from here on out. If he's your 23rd guy and you're flipping him back and forth in lines, that's great. But once again, it's like Sheasel. It's like Keys. Does he hold his role? Yes or no? If he holds his role, great. If he moves forward, then it's going to end up being a bit of a dud pick. And I should touch on DPPs. I think I missed all that. So really not that much that was relevant. I think the only rookie that gained it was Dev Robertson, for those that still have him gained forward, which will be nice if you want to move him into your forward line. And then mostly it was just defenders picking up midfield status. So Dacos, Sinclair, Doherty are the three that come to mind. Beyond that, not too much relevant. People were hoping that Gawn would gain forward status, but I believe he just missed out. And Walsh was the other one who might gain forward status, but he played mostly midfield on the weekend. Produced a good score, I think, which is nice for holders. But yeah, no forward status, unfortunately. We are 120. Well, would you rather if he had a poor score and gained forward status or scored the 120? I guess you take the 120, right? So for me, no trades this week, and then it really just comes down to vice captain, captain, and having a quick look through this. There's not a ton that appeals to me, if I'm being honest. There's no real obvious matchups. I mean, you look at like North and Hawks, they're fighting each other. West Coast is against Richmond, so Toronto, but can you really trust them after the last couple of weeks? Probably not. So I feel like that's a pretty hard one to look at or go to. And then some of these more speculative options like a Stewart, they really end up being in captain spots, which is no good. I feel like I can't trust the Port boys against Carlton. So just having a quick look through all this in totality. Oh, like Petrarca can't be trusted anymore. Like, it's just stuff like that. So look, maybe, I mean, Neil's been in really good form the last 2 weeks. I've taken his score last 2 weeks, 2 140s. His track record against Melbourne isn't that good, but there's no Oliver and there's probably going to be no Petrarca in the midfield. So he does become a little bit more interesting. But I think Bontempelli into Dacos or Bontempelli into Dawson or Dacos into Dawson are going to be the ones that make the most sense this week. And I really can't see much beyond that, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, I think that's most of the stuff. So if you do look, I try and give broad advice at this time of the year, but it's always really tricky because a lot of it comes down to how many trades you've got left, what your cover looks like, these types of things, and you got to try and strike that balance between having getting the best team you can, getting the points on field, but then being able to cover injuries. So if you are in a position where you had like a Ridley and a Lloyd and they're out for this week, and you've also got Dunkley out, what of these can you cover? Do you need to trade? These types of things. In general, I probably still wouldn't be trying to go down below 2 trades from now to the end of the year. I'd be holding on to these. You just don't know what can happen, and you don't want to be left. I don't know. Say Neil goes down from here, and yes, you've got a 23rd player that comes on and covers him, but then you've got 650k. It's just doing nothing, and I think I'd rather turn it into another 650k player than using Keys to cover him. So anyway. Just quick thoughts on this stuff, but yeah, I'd still be trying to hold a couple of trades from this point, and that's the same with me. Even if I could do like a day to Sicily, which I don't think I could, I'm not actually sure I would do it this week, just because going down to 1 injury trade without a 23rd player just seems so risky that's not the type of thing that I'd be doing. I'd be holding on to this stuff. All right, that's everything. As always, hope you're going well. Hit me up with any questions below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.